Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, this is many a true and welcome to Democracy Week 2022. Now, in case you knew, or you've just forgotten, what is Democracy Week? Well, it's a week where we do democracy as you probably should have guessed. In particular, it's a way of me figuring out which series you guys want to see most in 2022. We did it for the first time about a year ago, and the three winners were Knights of the Old Republic, Subnautica, and Dragon Age Origins. So naturally, we're doing Democracy Week again, but this year, it is bigger. And on top of that, it's just a little bit more evil. Because this year, we haven't got 5 games for you to pick between, no. No. This year, you've got to choose between 21 divided into a trio of classes. So, okay, we'll get into all the games momentarily. This video will introduce you to all the lovely candidates. But before we get into that, how does democracy actually work? So, starting tonight, over on the channel's community tab, there is going to be a trio of polls, 7 games in each. Probably sounds nice and simple, but no. First past the post democracy is an awful system that leads to tactical voting where people don't vote for what they actually want to vote for. Instead, they just vote for what they think is okay that could still have a chance of winning. Instead, we're going to do a much better form of democracy, which is a multi-stage transferable elimination system. Oh, I do love a bit of advanced democracy. So, what happens at the end of the day is, whichever candidate in each of the 3 classes has the least vote is eliminated. Then, tomorrow, a new trio of polls will go live featuring now 6 games per poll. So, the people who voted for whichever game came last can now redistribute their vote to wherever they would like that vote to go. And then we continue eliminating 1 game per day for the remainder of this week. Meaning, as each day goes by, the stakes get higher and higher because the losing game each day has more and more votes behind it, and thus a bigger upset could be created. It's a very exciting form of democracy, and a very fair one too, as it means you can, without any hesitation, always vote for your favourite candidate without having to worry about going for the most sensible option or anything boring like that. And we will continue on in that format until either a final runoff between the final 2 at the end of this week, or any game achieves more than 50%, at which point, even if every other vote were to go behind the second place candidate, they'd still be second place, so there's no point in continuing at that point. You can officially call the results with whatever they are at that point. But while we're waiting for the first poll to go live, let me introduce to you the candidates you'll be voting on. So, category number 1, the main event. The big lads, the AAAs, the games that everybody has heard of and huge numbers of people absolutely flipping adore. This is the category where some of the biggest and most well-known games will be duking it out. Some brand new to the channel, some follow-ups to games that have been on the channel in the past. So, let's kick off with a great big exciting newcomer, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And for me, this would be a bit of a homecoming because I was a big Nintendo kid and I was super into Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask. Amazing, really fascinating experiment into doing a time loop scenario. Wind Waker, a wonderful game, absolutely adore it. Now, I sort of fell out of the franchise a little bit after that. Twilight Princess, I wasn't so keen on the darker and more grim aesthetic and tone to it. And Skyward Sword, me and the motion controls just didn't really get on. But I've heard so many good things about Breath of the Wild. And that's candidate 1 of 20 bloody 1. Number 2, potentially returning, it's XCOM 2. I love the original XCOM. A brilliant turn-based tactical shooter made so damn tense by the fact that when a character dies, they are gone forever. I really enjoyed the original XCOM and I will be delighted for number 2 to come back with a full bloody series. Now, number 3, it's the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Skyrim, one of my favourite series I've ever put together in the history of the channel. The Saga of Benor. Just an absolutely magnificent series that has a very special place in my heart. I would be delighted to step back in time into the world of the Elder Scrolls. But, before you get too excited, let's move on to the first evil twist of Democracy Week 2022. Candidate number 4, The Elder Scrolls Morrowind. That's right, both Elder Scrolls are candidates in the same category. This is why we need the elimination transferable vote system, because it means you don't need to agonize about potentially splitting the Elder Scrolls vote, because whichever one gets eliminated first, you can transfer your vote straight to the other. That's what makes this system so damn nice. So, Oblivion and Morrowind, both up for grabs. Candidate number 5, Knights of the Old Republic 2. Obviously, about a year ago, we did Knights of the Old Republic 1. I absolutely loved it. A big Star Wars RPG, what's not to love? But, Knights of the Old Republic 2, 1, was not made by BioWare, it moved over to Obsidian, and 2, going into Knights of the Old Republic 1, I did know some of the plot ahead of time. I knew the big twist that was coming up. Knights of the Old Republic 2, I don't know. I'm going in completely, 100% truly blind. And you might be able to guess at this point what the next 2 candidates to wrap up the category are. Candidate number 6, Subnautica Below Zero. The sequel, Subnautica, had an amazing time with that when I wasn't being scared witless by monstrous crab spiders that tried to murder me. So yes, aside from that, amazing game, wonderful universe, really unique game. Would love to dive in if you're part of the pun and do a bit more. And finally, Dragon Age 2. Obviously, we're wrapping up Origins right now, so if this were to win, we wouldn't do it immediately. I give it, like, you know, a bit of a pause, but we will get to it really damn soon. I would love to dive even deeper into the universe. So, that's category number 1. Those 7 games will be fighting each other. Let's move over to category number 2. And this category is going to be the strategy games. So, let's get through these. This is nice and simple stuff, really. Candidate number 1, Crusader Kings 3. Obviously, Royal Court landing any moment, and though I've done a playthrough already, obviously there is an entire world of very different cultures, religions, all sorts of bits and pieces. So, we could go back in to do Crusader Kings 3 a bit more very soon indeed. Candidate number 2, Stellaris. It has been a while since we've done a full Stellaris playthrough. Since then, we've gained some big, beefy updates, some massive new late game technology, the space and a subterfuge system, all sorts of bits and pieces, and perhaps most excitingly of all, yes, once upon a time I did an impossible run where I was just able to win against the toughest crisis the game was willing to spawn. Since then, they've added the ability to make the crisis 5 times bigger still. So, yes, Impossible Run Mark 2 could well be on the cards. Candidate 3, sticking with Paradox but moving into a brand new universe I have never played before, Europa Universalis 4. I know nothing about this. I mean, it's a Paradox game with a big map, and nope, that's it. That's the entirety of my knowledge. So, a brand new Paradox universe that we could be playing very soon indeed. And speaking of that, candidate number 4, Hearts of Iron 4. Moving forward in time a bit to Paradox's World War II military epic, where things are perhaps a little bit different to what we've seen before. Less dynastic wrangling, more huge-scale industrial war raging across the world. Could be something very different indeed. And a bit of an outsider, because we're not done with Paradox games yet. Candidate number 5, Victoria 2. A relatively small game that's not talked about so much, but Victoria 3 is coming up at some point this year, and I've been keeping a really close eye on the dev diaries, and it sounds really exciting to me. So diving into Victoria 2 before 3 shows up could well be a rather cool thing to do. Don't worry though, it's not just Paradox games. Let's bring in a couple of wild cards from elsewhere. Candidate number 6, Civilization 6, appropriately enough, because I love Civ 6, and it's introduced a whole bunch of weird and wacky game modes and rule sets over the course of the last year with the New Frontier Pass, and a bananas on toast lunacy run where every single rule set is turned on, so there are zombies and secret societies and corporations and everything. Oh yeah. Yeah, that could be a fun time, right there. And finally, I've been talking about this one for years. Candidate number 7, Empire Total War. And Empire Total War is, it is a rough diamond. it's not necessarily my favourite or the best Total War game, but in some ways I think it might be the most interesting of all. Consider the things it attempted to introduce. One of the most interesting trade systems in all of Total War history. A full naval combat system, multiple theatres of war, a really interesting set of political crises that can kick off. It was a fascinating, brilliant game, not without its problems, but well worth experiencing, discussing, and reliving in all its weird, quirky glory. Those are your 7 strategy games, and that brings us to the final category, the outsiders. Now, here we've got the obscure games, because there are some games that I absolutely adore and would love to bring to the channel, but they might not necessarily have been hugely commercially successful. They might not be that well known, so making them scrap against the big AAA lads in the heavyweight category just didn't feel fair. Instead, we're going to have them in their own little category down here to see which of them sound the most interesting to you. And in some ways, this is the category I'm most excited about, because we've got some really weird and wonderful gems. So, let's dive straight in. Number 1, Eternal Darkness. Probably my favourite psychological horror game of all time. A creepy, narrative epic that tells an incredible story set across 2,000 years of human history, which just uses its structure so bloody cleverly, where you might visit the same location 1,000 years apart. To give you an example, at one point you visit a church in the Middle Ages when it's still operating as a church, but then go back there during World War I when it's been converted into a field hospital, filled with dying soldiers in the middle of the night with an artillery barrage happening in the background, and that is just as incredible as it sounds. The story is amazing. A brilliant voice cast, headed by Jennifer Hale, who had at that point definitely done video game voice work before, but I believe this was her first big narrative lead performance. But, of course, what Eternal Darkness is most and best remembered for is the sanity meter, where as time went by, your sanity started to slip away, and you started suffering from hallucinations in the game. And I don't want to say any more because, yeah, I wouldn't want to spoil it. It is an incredible experience, one of my favourite games of all time, and I will be delighted to bring a series to you. Moving on to number 2, something completely different, because this one I would be going in blind to as well. Jade Empire, the forgotten RPG from the golden age of BioWare, because at the same time as BioWare were making Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect 1, Dragon Age Origins, they also made a martial arts RPG that most people just seem to have kind of forgotten existed, including me. So yeah, no idea what I'd be getting myself into there, but I mean, it sounds worth a look, doesn't it? Number 3, and I think you were all expecting this, Skies of Arcadia, one of my favourite games of all time. A big Dreamcast RPG which, if I had to sum it up, I would say is a celebration of the joy of exploration. It is a big, bright, wonderful world filled with incredibly memorable characters, where the game just says, here's a world, here's an airship, go! Find lost ruins, ancient monsters, discover new continents, and just enjoy one of the finest stories I think has ever been told in a game. The score is incredible, the stylized graphics have aged really nicely, and it completely sticks the landing. From an incredible opening sequence to an utterly epic finale, it is just a brilliant, brilliant game. Number 4, Advance Wars 2. This one isn't even out yet, because Advance Wars 2 was originally on the Game Boy Advance, and is one of my favourite little strategy games of all time. A bright, colourful strategy game with a brilliant campaign, and if I do say so myself, I'm rather good at this game. So, jumping straight into the hard campaign and challenging myself against the hardest stuff going, oh, I would be flipping delighted. Number 5, and we are getting into the wild stuff now. Lost Kingdoms 2 from 2003, a kind of real-time deck builder RPG thing Made by From Software. Yes, that From Software. This is what they were doing before Dark Souls. That I perhaps remember most fondly for having many cards that just spawned friendly AI creatures onto the battlefield. So you could just create a friendly army that just followed you around and tried to do its best against the enemy, and it was a chaotic delight. Number 6, perhaps the most obscure game of all, we're going back to 1999 for Hybrid Heaven. And, okay, none of you have heard of this, and it is a crime. Hybrid Heaven was I suppose, a brawler RPG that was a good decade ahead of its time. It had one of the most fascinating combat systems I've ever seen in a game, where all of your limbs were being individually modelled. If you wanted to get stronger at punching with your right arm, you needed to use your right arm in combat, but your exact stance and standing and the enemy's stance and positioning affected how strong a particular punch would be. Putting together combos, you had to consider how your stance would change. If you punch with your right hand, now you had the right side of your body forward, so you'd want to change for the next part of your combo into your left. On top of that, if you wanted to get better at blocking, you just needed to let the enemy pummel you a bit. And if you wanted to learn a move, you needed to let the enemy hit you with it. You only learnt moves in that game by having them used on you. So when you were taking on elite bosses with some unique attacks, you had to balance not dying, but allowing yourself on occasion to be hit if you wanted to learn their most powerful attacks, so you could use them going forward. It is just an absolute flipping marvel. One of my favourite combat systems in all games ever. And this game was a flop and nobody remembers it, and that is just an absolute bloody tragedy. And finally, a bit of a curveball for you, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. Me and the Fire Emblem franchise have never really got on that well, to be honest. I always struggle with them a tiny bit, but one has always clicked for me. If you're unfamiliar with Fire Emblem in general, by the way, it is a tactical combat RPG where the big core selling point is when somebody runs out of hit points, they are dead. You don't get them anymore. They're gone. So it's a very hardcore roguelike tactical RPG, if you like, I suppose. And yeah, for whatever reason, Path of Radiance really works for me. It is a fantastic little game, and I would be more than happy to bring you a full series. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That is Democracy Week 2022 beginning tonight. The first of the polls will go live. Whichever candidate comes last will be eliminated. Tomorrow, a new set of polls with 6 candidates, and so on until I have got some really useful bits of information about what series you guys would like to see. And the games that do the best, the ones that come out on top, you might be seeing them really bloody soon indeed. I am so excited for the results of this, by the way. I have no idea what's going to win. Please do make your voice heard. The more people that vote, the better idea I have about what you guys want to see, which is so valuable to me, and I will be keeping an eye on the results of this just as much as you guys are, because seriously, right now, I don't know what the next few series on Many a True Nerd are going to be. So, hopefully, you're looking forward to that, and hopefully some of you right now are agonising over the difficult decisions you have to make over the coming days. And yes, indeed, some very exciting series could be starting very soon indeed. But in the meantime, I've been John, this has been Many a True Nerd, and this has been the announcement for Democracy Week 2022. Thank you very much, and goodbye.